I remember the exact moment something inside me finally went quiet. Not broken, not angry, just done. It was the kind of silence that only comes after years of being overlooked, like a door closing so softly no one notices it ever shut at all. That Thanksgiving morning, I lingered in my kitchen longer than necessary, stretching time in small, meaningless ways as if I could delay what I already knew was waiting for me. My laptop sat open on the counter, glowing faintly with rows of numbers that made perfect sense to me. Income streams, maintenance schedules, tenant histories, all arranged neatly in systems I had built from nothing. I stared at it for a second longer before closing it gently, the soft click echoing more final than it should have. It felt like I was putting away a version of myself that no one in my family had ever bothered to understand. The scent of sweet potato casserole filled the space around me, warm and familiar, wrapping the room in something that almost felt like comfort. Brown sugar melted into cinnamon, with toasted pecans adding that soft crunch I remembered from childhood. It was my grandmother's recipe, passed down like something sacred, though I had quietly made it my own over the years. A small pinch of cayenne, barely noticeable unless you paid attention, gave it a subtle heat that lingered at the end. No one had ever commented on it, not once. Either they never noticed, or they never cared enough to ask. I stopped wondering which one it was a long time ago. Late autumn light spilled through the windows of my condo, softening everything it touched. The worn gray couch looked almost inviting, the shelves seemed less bare, and the second-hand dining table carried a quiet charm it didn't actually have. In that light, my life could almost pass as something warm, something complete. But I knew better than to trust appearances. I always had. I grabbed my keys, then paused by the mirror near the hallway. The same face looked back at me, calm and composed in a way I had practiced for years. I tilted my head slightly, studying my own reflection as if I might find something different this time. Every year, I told myself the same thing before walking into that house. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe my father would listen when I spoke. Maybe my mother would say my name without attaching it to someone else's shadow. Deep down, I knew it wouldn't happen. It never did. In my family, there were never just two daughters. There was Claire, and then there was me. Claire was the story everyone loved to tell, polished and effortless, like success had always belonged to her. She walked into rooms and people noticed. Conversations shifted around her. My father's voice carried a different tone when he introduced her. Pride wrapped around every word like it was proof of something he had built himself. Then, almost as an afterthought, he would gesture toward me and say my name. Simple and unadorned, like a detail that didn't require explanation. By the time I turned 25, I had already started building something real, even if no one in my family cared enough to see it. My first property was a worn-out duplex on Alder Street, the kind of place most people would pass without a second glance. The paint peeled in long, tired strips. The porch sagged like it had given up years ago, and there was a persistent leak under the upstairs sink that smelled faintly of rust and old plaster. I poured everything I had into that place. My savings disappeared overnight, replaced by uncertainty and a kind of quiet determination I didn't fully understand at the time. I moved into one side and rented the other to a retired librarian named Evelyn Harlow. She had soft eyes, a steady voice, and a habit of paying her rent early without fail. Every December, she left a small plate of oatmeal cookies outside my door, never mentioning it, never expecting anything in return. It became our silent tradition. I remember telling my father about that duplex over Sunday dinner, my voice carrying a cautious excitement I hadn't yet learned to hide. I thought maybe this time would be different, that maybe he would recognize what it meant to take a risk like that. He didn't even look up from his plate when I finished speaking. He just shrugged slightly and said it wasn't real ownership, that it sounded more like complicated struggling than success. My mother stayed quiet, like she always did when silence was easier than choosing sides. Claire smiled into her glass, her expression polite but distant, and asked if I was worried about the kind of tenants I might attract. That was the moment something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger or resentment. It was something quieter, something more permanent. I stopped reaching for their approval after that. Years passed, but not in a way anyone in my family noticed. I kept working, slowly and carefully building something piece by piece. One property turned into two, then to became four. I learned everything the hard way. From late-night repairs to difficult tenants to contracts that needed more attention than I ever expected. I created systems, built relationships, and kept my name out of places it didn't need to be. On paper, my company existed. In reality, it grew steadily, quietly, without the kind of noise people associate with success. I dressed simply, drove an older car, and never gave anyone a reason to look closer. My family mistook that for failure. They saw what they expected to see, and I let them. 3 years ago, everything shifted in a way none of them ever connected back to me. My father lost his job, something that had once defined him so completely it was hard to imagine him without it. The house they had lived in for decades slipped out of their hands faster than anyone expected. For the first time, they were the ones looking for stability instead of providing it. Eventually, they applied for an apartment in one of my buildings. I still remember the moment I saw their names appear in the system: Richard Mercer and Elaine Mercer. My parents, they had no idea my father handled everything himself. Signed the lease without ever realizing whose signature sat quietly behind the management company name. I could have told them, I thought about it more than once. But something held me back. Something that wasn't about revenge or pride. It was about distance. About letting things exist without forcing them into something they had never been. So I said nothing. That Thanksgiving, I carried the casserole dish into their building, the warmth seeping through the edges of the container into my hands. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning solution and something fried from a nearby apartment. It felt strange walking into a place I owned, knowing they saw it as something temporary, something beneath the life they used to have. Dinner unfolded exactly the way I expected it to. Laughter filled the room, mostly centered around Claire and whatever new venture she was involved in. Conversations flowed easily between everyone else, circling around me without ever quite including me. I nodded when appropriate, smiled when necessary, and kept my voice measured when I spoke. Then my father leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting slightly as he looked at me. His voice carried just enough to quiet the room without making it obvious he intended to. He asked if I was still renting, the question hanging in the air like something casual, something harmless. 14 people sat around that table. Not one of them stepped in. Not one of them redirected the conversation or softened the moment. They all just watched, waiting to see how I would respond. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed lightly against the table. It was a routine notification, something I would normally glance at without thinking. But my father reached for it before I could, his movement quick and absent-minded, like he expected nothing more than a simple message. What he saw instead wasn't simple. It was a rent ledger, clean and precise, showing payments and account details. His name, my mother's name, unit for be paid in full. His expression changed in a way I had never seen before, something shifting beneath the surface as realization slowly began to take shape. He kept reading, his eyes moving faster, his posture stiffening almost imperceptibly. The room began to understand before anyone said a word. It wasn't obvious at first, just small glances, subtle changes in expression, the kind of awareness that spreads quietly but completely. I reached for my phone and took it back gently, placing it on the table with a calm I didn't have to force anymore. Then I set my fork down and looked directly at him. He had asked what I did, so I told him. My voice didn't shake, didn't rise, didn't carry any of the emotion that had once defined moments like this. I explained that the building we were sitting in was mine, along with several others, 24 units in total. I kept it simple, factual, leaving no room for interpretation or dismissal. Claire's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. A mix of disbelief and something else she probably didn't have a name for. My mother looked at me like she was seeing someone she had never met before, her understanding of me unraveling in real time. My father glanced around the room, as if searching for something that would make sense of what he had just learned. Slowly, it all connected for him. The quick repairs, the efficiency, the way problems seemed to disappear before they could grow. None of it had been accidental. For the first time, no one came to his defense. No one softened the moment or redirected the attention. The silence in that room belonged to me. I stood up calmly, picking up the empty casserole dish as if this were just another ordinary moment in an ordinary day. I reached for my coat, slipping it on without rushing, without hesitation. I told him his lease was valid through April, that management would handle any discussions after that. My tone remained even, professional, almost detached. It wasn't cold, it was simply clear. No one spoke, not even him. I walked out into the cold evening air, the door closing softly behind me. The chill hit my face immediately, sharp and grounding, but it didn't bother me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel small walking away from my family. I didn't feel overlooked or dismissed or quietly diminished. I felt complete, not victorious, not triumphant, just finished with something that had taken years to understand. And as I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold, steady air, I realized that I had never needed them to see me. I just needed to stop waiting for them to.